Factoring isn't always the best. Graphing doesn't always work if it doesn't look nice on the graph or if we need a really big graph. So quadratic formula is kind of our last thing, and it works for everything. And some people really like the quadratic formula the best. I like it the best because I know it's always going to work. The problem with the quadratic formula is it's lots of steps. And if you accidentally mix up one step, then you're done. Like your answers are going to be so wrong. The other thing I don't really like about the quadratic formula is there's no spots to check to see if what you're doing is right. As we graphed it, remember we could check our table, double check that our table matched. We could double check that there was a minimum. As we do factoring, there's lots of times where you check, you make sure that this all works, you double check this all works as you go. Okay, with quadratic formula, there's not really a way to check to see if you're right or wrong until the very, very end. So that's kind of the part that I don't like about the quadratic formula, but once you get good at it, it goes by really fast. Okay? So first thing we have here is we have our ax squared plus bx plus c. This is where I'm going to use my colored pencils here. I'm going to use blue for a. I'm going to use yellow for b. And I'm going to use brown for C. So if you want to color code, you can. Now this is a really long formula, which again is the reason why sometimes this can be really difficult. So our formula goes x equals, and then we see this like minus b. Does anyone remember when we were doing our quadratics, when we were graphing, how did we say that? Opposite. Good. So we're going to write that this is opposite of b. Now we have a new symbol here in the middle. I'm going to rotate here so I'm just in the shade completely. There we go. All right, we have this new symbol in the middle. What does this symbol look like to you? What two symbols combined? It's a plus sign, and then below it is a minus sign. So we call this a plus or minus. Okay, this is where I'm going to use my highlighters to highlight that square root. That square root is going to take a big part in what we do today, so I'm just going to highlight over it the square root. And then we have b squared, so another b, minus 4, and then our a. So whatever colors you're using for a and c, you can color code. 4ac. And then it's the whole thing, all of it, is over 2 times a. So you have to be really careful at the beginning of these problems to make sure that you're putting it in the correct way. Because again, if you mess up one thing, you put a negative somewhere where it doesn't belong, a positive somewhere, you accidentally put B instead of A or A instead of C, then it's not going to get the right answer. Okay, Samaya, put your phone away. Thank you. All right, to help remember this formula, there's a song. It goes to the tune of Jack, or the Jack in the Box thing. So it goes x equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And that just kind of gets in your head, so that way you're making sure you're doing the formula right. So I'm going to sing it one more time normal. X equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You guys want to hear me sing it in opera style? No. I'm really good at opera. You don't want to hear my opera song? No. Okay, I won't push it. All right, here we go. Number 1. We have 2 examples we're doing today. All right, number 1, we have 9x squared plus 4x minus 20 equals 0. So our first step is going to be to identify what is our A, B, and C. I'm just going to write that a little off to the side here. Just notate it. Again, this is something you'd probably just do in your head. You wouldn't take time to write down when we're doing the work. But it's going to be really important for what we do. So what is our A? What number? 9. Today in your quick check, there is a problem where you're typing in the numbers. Remember, do you need to type in the variables? No, just numbers. Okay, what is our B? 4. And our C? Negative 20, good. Really important we include that negative with that 20. Alright, and then we're going into that formula, so we're going to say x equals, and I like to draw this big fraction line first. And then I like to use 2 lines because otherwise everything gets really, really squished. Alright, so x equals opposite of b. So what's my b? 4. So what's the opposite of 4? Negative 4. And then plus or minus the square root, big square root, goes all the way to the end of that C at the end there. So big square root. Now we're going to start using parentheses, especially in the square root. We want to use those parentheses. So x equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared. So in parentheses, what's my b? 4. This time just normal 4. Squared minus 4ac. So 4. This 4 is always here. It's part of the formula. It doesn't change. It's always going to be 4. And then our A, what is our A? 9 times C, negative 20. I'm going to make sure that my square root goes over that whole thing. Mine didn't quite make it all the way. I'm going to make sure it goes all over 2, and then times A. What is my A? 9. Okay, if you want to take a moment to color code, you can, so that way you can see where these numbers came from. So I have these 4s. Is this 4 because of the B? This one? No, so don't color code that one. That's part of the formula. Okay, I have 2 A's. I have the 9 on top and the 9 on bottom, and then only 1 C, the negative 20. Okay, and I like to highlight that square root. Now the reason why I like to highlight that square root is because it's going over so many things, it's like grouping symbol. So the first thing I'm going to do is that square root. But I'm not actually going to put the square root into my calculator yet. Okay, and the reason why is because if I put it into the square root, we might get a really big decimal number and then we have to round. We don't want to round our answer yet. We want to wait till the end. So in my calculator, I'm going to put in the inside. So I'm going to start with a parenthesis 4 squared minus 4 parentheses 9 parenthesis negative 20. And our answer is 736. Okay, so we're going to rewrite our work here, but this plus or minus actually breaks it into 2 problems. So I'm going to break this into one problem that is a plus problem and one problem that is a minus problem. I'm actually going to write it twice. So in my fraction, I still have this negative 4 out front, just this plus, and then square root But we know the number inside the square root now. Inside the square root is at 736. And it's still over 2 times 9. Now I'm going to copy that almost exactly over here. I'm only going to make one change. What's the change? Yep, instead of plus, we're going to use minus. So negative 4 minus the square root of 736 over 2 times 9. Alright, at this point, you could still break it into smaller steps. If you're using your Desmos calculator, Desmos is smart enough to just be able to put this all in and find the answer. If you're using your phone calculator, you need to add some parentheses around this top part and around the bottom part. Phone calculator is not smart enough. Even with the new update to your iPhone, it's not smart enough to be able to do that. So in Desmos, I'm actually going to create that fraction first. Remember, to create a fraction, I can either hit the divide sign or this AB. Okay, and then on the top I have negative 4 plus square root, I'm actually using the square root this time, 736. And then on the bottom, 2 parentheses 9. And we get this really long number. So we're going to round to the nearest hundredth today, so 2 decimal places. So do I want this to be 1.28 or round to 29? Yeah, what does that 4 tell me to do? Does that tell me to stay or go up? Stay. So 1.28. So our first answer is x equals 1.28. Okay, or, and then we have our second answer. And this answer, this one, again, this is why I like using Desmos. I'm always going to tell you that Desmos is the best. Because I have everything plugged in, the only thing I need to change is instead of this plus, I'm going to just delete that and put in a minus. Okay, so this one we have negative 1.72. This 9, does that tell me to stay at 72 or round to 73? 73, so negative 1.73. All right, we have one more, number 2. Should be able to finish before lunch here, just fine. All right, number 2, again, we're going to be solving. That's our key word here. I forgot it on the first one, but that's okay. We're going to solve negative c squared plus 6c minus 9 equals 0. Now, what can get a little confusing about this is the variables we're identifying is A, B, and C. But when I look at C, am I looking at these C's? No, I'm looking at numbers. Remember, I should have number answers for all of these. So for A, I'm looking at the number in front of C squared. What number is in front of C squared? 1. Just 1? Negative 1. Good. Negative 1. Okay, what's in front of the C, the middle term? 6. And then what is our C, our constant? Negative 9. Okay, if that helps you to color code, go for it. I know Zeph didn't want to hear it, but I got to practice if my other classes want to hear it. I got to practice and warm up. So, as we do our formula, it's really important that we're always looking back at our formula here or that we have it memorized. And goes x equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Or if you're going to the opera, it sounds like this. X equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Really, really good. Thanks. I think X could start a career. All right, so X equals. We're going to start with that fraction because it's a long fraction. I'm going to do opposite of B. So what is my B? B is 6. So what's the opposite of positive 6? Negative 6. Plus or minus the square root. And then in the square root, we start with B squared. Do I want to use 6 squared or negative 6 squared? This time just the 6. So 6 squared minus 4ac. 4 is part of the song. It's part of the formula. 4 is always there. Okay, and then our A, negative 1. C, negative 9. All over 2A, which is negative 1. Okay, if you want to pause for a moment and color code, you can. Just remember which parts we filled out, where they came from. Okay, and then I like to highlight the square root because that square root is going to be where we start. So at this point, I'm going to break this up into 2 problems. I'm going to break it up into an adding problem and a subtracting problem because it's adding or subtracting. It's really 2. So I'm going to have negative 6 plus the square root of something over 2 times negative 1. I'm going to figure out what that something is in just a moment. Or I have negative 6 minus the square root of something over 2 times negative 1. I need to figure out what goes in that square root. Let me try it black here. Okay, so in my calculator, I'm going to do parentheses. Yeah, it's just the reflection's really bad right now. 6 parentheses squared minus 4 parenthesis negative 1, parenthesis negative 9. And our answer is 0. So in that square root, in both square roots, we're going to put a 0. At this point, I personally just put the whole thing in my calculator, especially if I'm using Desmos. So in my calculator, I'm going to do a fraction sign first. I can do the divide sign or the AB sign. Negative 6 plus, really important that we have that square root, 0. And then on the bottom, 2 parentheses, negative 1. So my first answer is 3. Okay, and then because I use Desmos, I don't have to retype the whole thing. I just have to change the plus to a minus. What? Did I change it? I did. What happens to my answer this time? It stays the same. Okay, why does it stay the same? What is the square root of 0? Square root of 0 is just 0. Is adding 0 different than subtracting 0? Nope. So think about it on our graph. Where would it hit if it touches the graph only one time? Remember when it only touched it once, it was right at the vertex. So that's what's happening here, is it's touching it right at that vertex. We really only have one answer because both answers are the same. We don't need to write x equals 3 or x equals 3. It's just x equals 3.